10th edition Warhammer 40,000 is on its way, and that means we have a lot to cover coming out of the Adepticon preview. This video is going to come down into 3 sections. We're going to talk about what we know, definitively what we know. We're going to talk about how that might impact the Genestealer Cults. And then the last thing we're going to talk about at the end of the video is what do you do between now and June when 10th edition of Warhammer 40,000 is expected to arrive. So lots to cover in this video. Raise your banners, overload your fuel cells, because the day of Ascension and the countdown to 10th edition starts right now. Those of you that have possibly been living in a dark hive city sewer somewhere waiting for the day of Ascension to arrive and missed that this past week was Adepticon and with it the big Games Workshop Warhammer preview. I have put a link to the Warhammer community page down in the description. Also a separate link to just the trailer for 10th edition. If somehow you have managed to find this video but did not know that that video existed, by all means, click the link, watch it. It's amazing. So there were 2 big things that came out of Adepticon for Warhammer 40,000. The first being that Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels chapter, Dark Angels Legion, whatever you want to call them, will be returning as the final chapter of the Arcs of Omen saga. This should come as no surprise, really. This was pretty obvious, the move that they were going to make, especially when, Vestor, the Archifiend, was going to attack the rock. It's like, oh, gee, I wonder what's inside the rock that could possibly deal with, the end of the world. So the Lion, he's kind of a one-dimensional character, but that said, this model is gorgeous, and the dimension that they're going to put him into works really well. He's got this great grizzled veteran knight look about him, and now he's going to go off questing through the Imperium Nihilus, just slaying demons, righting wrongs. It's just the whole thing smacks of Arthurian legend, which is kind of like the Dark Angels are a grim, dark version of that, so it works so well. I love that they made him older than Roboute Guilliman, like he's aged in stasis somehow. All right, so segment 1 in this video is going to be what we know about 10th edition. So here's what we know about 10th edition. It's going to be coming out sometime this summer, probably June, based on previous edition change cycles. And it is going to be a complete reset of rules. So this will be the 2nd edition change that I've actually played through. I went from 8th to 9th, and now we're going from 9th to 10th. So when we say hard reset on the rules, the day 10th edition releases is the last day you can use any of your 9th edition codexes or rule books, the exception being, as we mentioned, the Arcs of Omen books. With this change to this massive hard reset of the rules is also going to come something really cool, and that is free indexes and data sheets for all factions available day 1. These may or may not eventually get replaced with pay codexes, but we'll get to that in a minute. What we know at the moment is that the day 10th edition releases, all of your core rules, as well as the individual rules and army sheets that you need to play your specific faction, will be released. So the big enemy of 10th edition is going to be the Tyranids, and we are going to be set in the Segmentum Pacificus, which is a different section of space for Warhammer to take part in. A lot of stuff usually happens on the eastern fringes, Altamar and the opposite end of the galaxy from where this is going to be set. That'll be fun to kind of revisit that part of space, get some more lore. That's definitely one thing we can probably expect to see a lot of in 10th edition that relates directly to Genestealer Cults is lore, because they did mention that this new campaign, this new 10th edition, is going to come with a really heavy, thick campaign that's going to be available, and I imagine Genestealer Cults are going to play a role in that. We also know that the rules are going to get massively streamlined. So right now, for instance, let's look at our Genestealer Cults Codex. We have our datasheet abilities. That's the abilities that are printed directly on the datasheet. We have our battle forged abilities, we have stratagems, and all of these are on different pages. So if you were playing against a complete stranger and they were asked to see all of your army abilities, you would hand them your codex, and because codexes are not universally laid out, so Battleforged rules are not on the same page in every codex. That's super annoying. Datasheets don't start on the same page. So somebody who didn't play Genestealer Cults would really have no idea where to even look in your codex to find things like exposed. Right? So it's really difficult to, in-game, keep track of your rules and reference them quickly. And it is also almost impossible to share your faction rules with your opponent, which can lead to a lot of, gotcha moments that just don't feel particularly great when you're playing a competitive game. What Games Workshop says that they're going to do is they're going to streamline this. The FAQ that was released about the 10th edition, again, the link's down in the description did mention that there are going to be some universal core rule, like universal keywords, not core, sorry, universal key rules. So Deep Strike is going to be referred to as Deep Strike across all armies. This I think they've done in the past. Smart that they're going back to it. Feel no pain will be a universal rule, right? If your Abominant has a feel no pain or any ability that lets him ignore wounds or roll to ignore wounds, it's going to be called one thing. So easy reference. So the most recent codex that we got for 9th edition, the last codex of 9th edition, was World Eaters. And when this codex released, a lot of people pointed to it and said this is what the future looks like for Warhammer, and it turns out that that's probably really true. So at the top, you're going to get your Legion trait. It's 2 paragraphs, easy enough to know. And then you have your 3 relics, 3 warlord traits, and then you're going to have 6 stratagems opposite that page. So there's the 2 pages that Games Workshop referenced in their preview. And this is everything you need to know about the World Eaters army, right? So every special ability condensed right here. So we know that they're going to streamline the rules. And we know fairly with some certainty that it's going to look a lot like the World Eaters Codex. The last thing we know is that there's a big change to the data sheets themselves and a couple of rules interactions there. So we saw in the preview the Termagant data sheet. And you'll notice that a lot of it looks similar, but there are many differences once you start digging through it. The first being that attacks and strength have been removed from the character profile themselves at the top left of your screen there. And then they've been moved down into the individual weapons. So depending on what weapon your model is equipped with, it's going to change the number of attacks and the strength of those attacks. Basically, essentially still the same character profiles, right? We have our movement, we have our toughness, we have our save. OC is what is going to be the new objective secured. It's basically, I think the way this mechanic is going to work is you're going to add up, that value of all the models you have near an objective, and you're going to compare it to whatever your opponent's total is, and that's who's going to have control of that objective. Pretty simple and straightforward. Obviously, the weapons categories have changed a lot. We can see we have a couple of keywords attached right to the weapon. Twin linked, that's, if it's the same as the old one, is basically hit rerolls. So perhaps some of the auras that characters had aren't going to apply anymore. And then on the right there, we have a unit-specific ability. Now, this is interesting. Unclear as to how many units per turn get to take advantage of this, if this is an always-on thing, if this is a thing that needs activated. There's a lot we don't know because we don't have the core rules. But what we do know is that every unit is going to have a special ability like this, and Games Workshop is trying to sort of rein in redundancies in your army build, or not redundancies, but spamming in your army lists. So while you might be able to take 6, blobs of neophytes, maybe they don't all get to benefit from Crossfire, and then you really don't want to take that many neophytes because there's no way to support them with your army rules and mechanics. That seems to be the direction they're going in, to make sure that whatever your collection is, it's viable and that players are rewarded more for how they construct their army. But let's start looking at what all of this could possibly mean for the Genestealer cults, because it's never too early to begin some wild speculation about stuff that we don't really have a whole lot of information for. But so here's kind of how I expect this new streamlined approach, and maybe what we can think that the Genestealer cult index is going to look like. So the big thing for the Genestealer cults is they have many, 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 many abilities. And I'm not even talking about the ones that are army construction ones. Like you can only take one patriarch, and then your magus has to be your warlord, right? Like there's apparently going to be a whole different way that armies are constructed now. It's going to look a lot more like Age of Sigmar is the rumors. I don't know much about Age of Sigmar. I'm about to learn some Age of Sigmar so that I can have a better understanding for how this is going to maybe spill over into Warhammer 40,000. But for now, we're just going to leave army building to the side and focus on the army abilities like Crossfire, Exposed, Unquestioning Loyalty, that kind of stuff. I would imagine the Genestealer cults are going to keep their blip markers in deployment, because that has been a characteristic in 8th and now 9th edition with a few tweaks here or there, but it's carried through. So I expect that it's going to stay as part of the core mechanic for this army. That's the universal top of your datasheet stack. The other half of that, like the other bullet point, if we're saying that we get 2 Unquestioning Loyalty, not because I think that's a particularly potent ability, but it seems to be one that Games Workshop has a love affair with, because it continues to come up over and over and over and over again. Protecting your characters is also sort of a core thing for Genestealer cults, so I can definitely see Unquestioning Loyalty getting baked into the sort of 2-paragraph army special abilities. Everyone is wondering, well, what about Crossfire and Ambush? Those being the two of the more powerful mechanics of 9th edition Genestealer cults. So my guess is Crossfire is going to be an ability that's baked into data sheets, but not every data sheet. Like one unit can use your Crossfire. Like, so say Neophytes have Crossfire, right? And then one unit can actually activate their Crossfire in a turn, and that one unit gets +1 to hits, or something like that. But I don't think it'll be a universal army rule that is part of the main faction rules at the top of the data sheet, or the top of the army rules, because I don't think that that Crossfire and Exposed hit the themes that Games Workshop tries to hit to keep the game really flavorful. While they are super powerful abilities, I think that they're going to try and match those abilities in to specific data sheets in terms of Crossfire. And then I think Exposed is going to be one of our 6 stratagems. I think you'll probably still have some mechanics to set it up on the board. So you might still have to get, a unit here and a unit here and be able to draw a line, connecting those 2 things. And then if that scenario happens, boom, you can play your stratagem, and now both of those units, or one of those units, or if you're targeting that unit with those 2 units, you get Crossfire. Or not Crossfire, you get Exposed, right? So I could easily see Exposed showing up as a strat. I can also see Crossfire showing up as a strat, +1 to hit. But I think keeping one of those as a datasheet ability and one of them as a stratagem, or moving one of them to a stratagem, would be a fun way to still keep the army flavorful and still reward creative play with Genestealers. And I think we're going to see very much the same with Underground. I think some units are going to have Underground and some units are not. So I think when you set up from Ambush, you're still going to be able to pull units into Deep Strike. But then I think with the Underground ability, you're going to be able to Deep Strike within X subfaction and codexes, right? So we know at some point codexes are coming out and they'll be for sale. But what we don't really know, what was a little unclear, is when the codex release, is that going to invalidate the index? That is how it happened from 7th to 8th edition. But they did mention that like some rules and information were going to be, like evergreen, as they put it in the preview. So when we speculate about codexes for Genestealer cults, will the rules change from what the indexes were to what the codexes are. How is Games Workshop going to incentivize purchasing the codex beyond just having beautiful art and great lore? One idea that I would love to see executed is for the codex, the physical codex that you buy, to be where your Crusade rules live. So if you are super invested in Genestealer Cults and you love playing Crusade stuff, cool. You pick up your Genestealer Cult codex. You have tons of lore. You have tons of artwork. You get more relics that are specific to Crusade. You get more traits specific to Crusade. You can build in army rules so that as your Crusade army levels up and it gets more experience, you can layer in additional special rules to keep the game really flavorful and reward players for spending a long time with their Crusade stuff, while also not tying down matched play and competitive play to these really bulky rule systems. So forever and always in 10th edition, matched play can stay datasheet, 2 pages armory special abilities, so that, playing a Genestealer Cult is playing a Genestealer Cult is playing a Genestealer Cult. But if you switch over to like a Crusade mechanic, cool, now here's all the different relics and abilities that an army has. Okay, the last thing we have to talk about in this video, thank you for those who have made it here. What do we do between now and June? This is now the second one of these I've gone through, so I can say it's okay. There's still a lot of Warhammer to be played between now and when 10th edition comes out. Your army still loves you, even if you don't paint it. So just be aware that a lot of rules are going to be changing, and your models, the power that they have today, might not be the power that they have in a few months, which is why I will always and forever recommend build and paint to the rule of cool. If you love it, do it, because as editions change, you will still love the way your army looks and feels. 2 other things that are really exciting about this particular change of editions, though. The first one being that boarding actions are a thing, and you will still be able to play boarding actions with the current rule set in 10th edition. So if you're brand new to Warhammer and you're wondering where to start, I would say start with boarding actions, because you're going to get an idea for how the game is played. You're going to get an idea for factions and for models, and it's going to help you, build and paint your armies. We also know that starting in 10th edition, there's going to be a specific way you can play games with just individual combat patrol boxes. And this is super awesome for Genestealer Cults players, because the Genestealer Cult combat patrol is pretty much the bee's knees. 2 things this channel is going to be doing at the start of 10th edition. The first thing is we're going to do a complete breakdown, rule by rule, how to play Warhammer 40,000. So we're going to start with whatever the first rule in the core book is, and we're just going to go on through, and we'll do live demos on the table, models, go through all the interactions. Everyone's going to be learning something new, so we're all going to learn it together. So that'll be a fun video series to go through. We are going to do an ongoing narrative crusade. This will be set in the Segmentum Pacificus. It is going to involve Genestealer Cults. It's going to involve Space Marines. It's going to involve Drukhari / Corsairs, and the Thousand Sons / Renegade Knights. So those will be the factions vying for control in this Crusade campaign. We'll do our first battle reports. That's what 10th edition is going to look like for the channel. And in the lead up to 10th edition, we're going to go over the history of the Segmentum Pacificus. We're going to look at some of the homebrew lore for these chapters, and maybe how to write your own homebrew chapters and your own cult lore and stuff. So we still have lots of fun, exciting content to cover leading up to 10th edition. All right, that is going to wrap it for this first video of our countdown to 10th edition. This is something we are going to be keeping our eyes on, and like I said, we are still going to continue to break down the 9th edition codex, because there are some of you out there getting your armies ready for the last couple of months of 9th edition, and I want to thank you for supporting me thus far by continuing to make 9th edition content. For more day-to-day updates and following the creation of my cult and some of the Space Marine stuff we're getting ready to put together for the 10th edition Crusade, follow me over on Instagram. Astromax Media is the handle over there. You can also find us on Facebook if you would like to share pictures of what your armies are looking like. I know a couple of you out there are getting your first Crusade boxes, combat boxes together. Feel free to send them over and let me know if it's something I can share on the channel or not, because I'd love to do sort of a a video of just, what you guys are up to as the awesome subscribers that you always are. So thank you for watching this video, and until next time, geek your own way.